The Imitation Nation podcast covers all things counterfeit, hosted by Shabir Imber-Safdar of the Partnership for Safe Medicines and Sven Bergman of Venture Global. All statements are their own and not the opinions of their employers. Welcome to Imitation Nation number 15.
All right.
How are you? I know you're finishing a summer of kids and activities and so forth.
Lots of travel. Actually, flying to Florida tomorrow, and just got back from a different sporting event somewhere in the state. And before that we traveled to UK, and so it's a lot of travel. It's a lot of fun. It's all good. It's a constant shuffle of packing, unpacking, repacking, quick laundry in between, and recording this very important podcast. So, but it all works out.
All right, so let's talk about the most important thing to talk about, I think, which is the changes to de minimis, right? So, yeah. Sven, set us context. What is happening?
So de minimis has been, dying a slow death, and I think that the death is A, speeding up, and B, it was made permanent, and a date for its eventual demise has been predetermined. So just to catch everybody up, de minimis, obviously something that was created where it was intended for individuals to ship each other duty-free goods. So my mom can send things from Germany, or I can send her things duty-free. And that had been hijacked by, companies like Temu and Shein that were sending thousands of goods palletized as part of the Type 86 entry method, all as de minimis, into the country, and were really upending kind of the global trade. In addition, de minimis has been a consistent source or income place for counterfeit. Because de minimis, by definition, is supposed to be a lower risk good, so it normally gets screened less. In addition, those goods don't have any advanced data, so tougher for customs to target. And with 1.4 billion packages coming in, it just was impossible to kind of find the needle in the haystack. So de minimis was in urgent need of reform, and this administration has taken the spirit of reform to the utmost and had it terminated. So basically, as of May 2nd, the U.S. terminated the de minimis exemption for imports from China and Hong Kong. So that ended there first. They then put additional rules in place that says that if you cross-ship or transship through other countries, we will come after you and there will be significant penalties. In addition, they added an additional EO that's starting on August 29th. De minimis will be suspended for all imports from all countries, with a very limited exception for some postal shipments, basically back to my mom sending me things. And they have to be much tighter as far as showing that it goes from a person to a person. So reestablishing that one-on-one relationship, but that's only an EO. And so could also be undone by another president. So as part of the big, beautiful bill, there was a provision in there which permanently eliminates de minimis starting July 1st, 2027. So unless another act of Congress reestablishes that, de minimis will be gone.
So my understanding is that you and I and everybody else people who don't work in the world of anti-counterfeiting or international shipping, when you went on Amazon Marketplace or Shine or Temu and you ordered a cell phone charger that is worth like $15 or less, that came to you from the manufacturer in China as a de minimis package, and there's 1.3 billion of those that enter the U.S. every year. Have I got the scale right? Yeah.
That's basically it. And it's 1.4. That's what we see like in the postal network. There's additional shipments that would have come in under, express consignments and all of that. So yes, it's in the billions. And that's exactly it. So a lot of the things that you order that would have been direct shipped from China, and also that then came in small packages that came from China Post. In addition, making it worse, there was a UPO, the United Postal Union Treaty, that basically required the US to transport these shipments for breathtakingly cheap rates. So it cost a Chinese importer somewhere in the range of $9 to ship a small package with the as you described, the $15 item, and they could ship it for like $9 across the globe. I don't know if you've ever tried to ship anything to Europe or China, but it'll cost you hundreds, right? So not available to us individuals, not available to individuals, but it really supercharged this cheap good mass imports from companies that then were, I wouldn't say skirting the rules, but definitely leveraging the holes or loopholes that were in that system to ship billions of packages through a system, again, that was intended as a one-to-one relationship. So from my family to me, and they exploited it and uh, made it from one company to tens of thousands of consumers. So as we discussed previously on the pod, is there were some debates about getting rid of the value and changing the value from 800 to 200 or something like this. And that wouldn't have done anything because then the importer just lies about how much value it is. But getting rid of it will have an impact because all of these companies will now have to pay a tariff, no matter what the value of it is. And so it will shift, I think, the business models where they will either have to do a nearshoring, where they might put it, into Canada and Mexico, and then kind of hopefully get it cheaper there in a country with a lower um, import duty. It hopefully will spark some resettling of companies into the United States. And what I expect to happen over the next, 2 years as this gets fully implemented is I do expect that massive volume of parcels to become smaller. And the good thing about that is for really our purposes, again, neither you or I are tariff experts, but what it will do for the counterfeit space, if you decrease the size of the haystack, right, it becomes easier to find the needle. So I think over the long term, this will be a good thing against enforcement against counterfeits because it just will reduce the amount of packages to be inspected. And part of, and it's in the show notes to give people kind of the scale of it. CBS News did a great story recently on um, the inspection process that CBP has at the international ports of entry and IMFs, and kind of folks take a look at this, and you will see the sheer volume of it, and showing the immensity of the scale that it just can't be done to really inspect it. So I think long term it will have a good impact. I don't think it will be immediate because folks will continue probably trying to skirt the rules here and there, but it will be, I think, a positive development for less counterfeit goods. For some folks, it will not be welcome development because it will most likely increase the cost of goods for Americans who were used to buying very, very cheaply from overseas.
So let me dig down, and then I want to talk about some actual policy changes that affect anti-counterfeiting.
Hmm.
But just to make sure we've explained these concepts, transshipping obviously is when you'd ship your package to Canada and then directly on to the US because you think Canada has a better tariff rate for that de minimis package. But nearshoring is when you'd ship a bunch of them to a warehouse in a nearby country with an attractive tariff rate. And then when you're ready to actually fulfill an order, you would fulfill it almost as if you were like an Amazon warehouse that was located in a low tariff country
Right.
waiting to ship into the US, right?
Right. Or if they do it smart, with nearshoring, you can also use free trade zones. So in a free trade zone, you can move goods in, and as long as you kind of modify the good in a free trade zone, the automotive industry uses it a lot. You can change the product, assemble the product, make changes to it, and then re-import it out of the free trade zone for better or limited tariff deals. I expect things like that to increase. And again, I don't know how much Shein or Timo would be able to move part or any of their production in country. And you're right, the nearshoring is I establish a large warehouse in Canada, and then if the Canadian tariff is 15% versus, and I don't know where they are right now because they changed so much, but if it's 15% versus, China 50%, then yes, I'm just gonna ship all of this into Canada, make it a Canadian good, and then I sell it directly from Canada. So that's the nearshoring aspect that I expect to.
And what is the strategy that you could exploit um, of the fact that the tariffs seem to be changing? Like, it's not as if we changed all our tariffs in April. It seems like the tariffs change sometimes for planned reasons, sometimes because there's a falling out between the White House and a specific country. But there's definitely, it isn't as if we are living under a single tariff regime. It seems to be changing. Is there a way that you might see shippers, legitimate or illegitimate, taking advantage of that?
So as a legitimate shipper, yes, I will. If you have a bonded warehouse where I can just have it sitting basically in Canada and waiting for it to be imported, that's different than nearshoring. I kind of put it in a bonded warehouse, and then when the tariff rate lowers or goes away or changes again, then I deplete it out of that warehouse and take advantage of that. That would be a legitimate business to doing it. A legitimate way also would be using a free trade zone. Where I use a free trade zone, I do the final assembly in the free trade zone and might be able to take advantage of the tariff rate there. As far as counterfeiters or illegitimate shippers taking advantage of it, talking to the folks that I know in the space, um, because so much has been changing so often and so much, the rules were unclear to folks on how to follow them. That had created probably a little bit of cracks and pressure in the system where folks then were trying to flood the zone and they're like, oh, there's so much changing that it makes inspection even harder. However, with this change where starting August 29th, it kind of goes away. And then in 27, July 1st, 2027, it goes away for good. The rules are set now. And once the rules are set, that makes it harder for illicit actors to exploit those. So, but again, I know folks that work in large commercial shipping and freight forwarding companies, and yes, the changes have made the actual execution of trade very, very challenging. Um, and so having it permanently fixed will be better. And as I said, I do expect for just the sheer volume of parcels to drop significantly, and that will aid in enforcement. So I think that's where this will ultimately go.
And that's really the anti-counterfeiting angle, right? Like
That's the
I have
counterfeit angle.
heard, I think there's a lot of interest about in my specific space about medicine, about the idea that there was a large quantity of fentanyl or fake pills with fentanyl that were coming in through de minimis packages. I have not seen data that would suggest that that is true. As you may have learned if you read the New York Times magazine this weekend, they had a whole piece about specialists in Mexico who work for the cartels whose whole skill area is how to pack a car with fentanyl or pills in a way that it can't be found from a cursory examination. Obviously, a serious examination of a car is going to reveal anything, but these guys were expert at finding little hollow places in doors and then welding together compartments. And that really is where I think a great deal of the fentanyl comes to the country. I don't think it's de minimis packages, but there's got to be some. And there's definitely got to be an amount of non-fentanyl counterfeits, that we see all the time, right? We've seen tons and tons of, just the Shaw brothers that just pled guilty for smuggling in counterfeit Keytruda, right? They
Right.
were bringing that into the country in small quantities that were probably de minimis. So I wanted to test the theory. Will the removal of de minimis and the addition of minimal tariffs on these small packages make a difference? And I don't know that it's true. I looked up the different de minimis tariffs that are going into effect, and
Mm-hmm.
they're variable based upon the tariff agreement that your country has with the U.S. So
Mm-hmm.
they run from $80 if you have a low tariff rate of less than 16% on your country, or $200 if you have a rate of 25% above, and 160 in the middle. So the example I'm going to use is Ozempic, right? You
Hmm.
go to an online pharmacy and you order what is probably fake Ozempic. And instead of an $1,100 injector pen or the number of pens you need for a month, $1,100 monthly supply, you end up with something that costs 100. And the question we have to ask ourselves is whether or not adding an $80 tariff to that package is going to make you not want to buy it
Hmm.
or make that not a viable business. So, what do you think?
I don't think I agree with you. I don't think the 25, I think I heard the flat rate 25 and above a different rate 50 or whatever it is. I agree with you. That itself will not undermine the business of a counterfeiter if he is trying to move that into the country. That won't make a difference. I agree with you on that. What will make a difference is when you and I started working together, which has been over nearly a decade at this point. When we started, right, it was like 300 million packages a year, and that already was a large amount. But it was something where customs felt like we can get a handle around how to do it and special targeting and maybe more X-ray and certain things where like they felt like they can make a dent in it. When it ballooned to 1.3 billion parcels, that's just an impossible number to wrap your head around. Europe, as we discussed on the previous pod, has a worse issue. They have 4 billion a year because they have a train that literally runs from China into Europe, and so for them it's even worse. So I expect not necessarily the individual counterfeiters to be deterred. I expect for the number of packages to be reduced and therefore targeting to become better, especially if in the de minimis environment, they're going to start to increasingly require advanced data that provides better targeting. So I don't think the 25 or 50 or whatever change will do it. I think the sheer volume drop that I expect will improve enforcement because, as I mentioned before, it's a smaller haystack that I'm trying to find the needle in. I'm reducing the haystack. Will the bad actors still do it with tariffs? Absolutely. And then last piece, I agree with you. I don't think de minimis was ever a large source of pills. De minimis and international shipping environments and international mail facilities were a large source of raw fentanyl, so the powder form, because I just need to get, a small, and I've seen samples in IMFs where they have taken birthday cards, right, just a normal 2-foot birthday cards, and put a layer of fentanyl within the card and then glued it together. And so there's a because fentanyl is so powerful, there's a lot of ways to hide it in all kinds of parcels. Pills you see very very clearly on an X-ray. Medicines you see very clearly on X-ray. So again, when I reduce the 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 massive amount that I have to inspect, I think that enforcement will, as a result, improve. I don't think the tariff itself will do it. For me, it's the de minimis change will reduce the amount of parcels coming in and therefore making, hopefully, enforcement better. But I agree with you. I don't think the 25 or 50 or whatever tariff rate will deter a counterfeiter.
Yeah, to borrow a phrase from the online dating app world, of which I have friends who are in it, but I am not. I'm married for 25 years. This is a burn the haystack strategy, right? They're just
That's right.
trying to make the pile smaller.
That's
But
right.
if I'm selling illegal Keytruda, counterfeit Keytruda, that's actually heartburn medication, which is not a hypothetical, it actually happened. I'm not going to be deterred by a $200 tariff. It's just going to make the bargain slightly less bargainable for the person who doesn't realize that they're not actually getting real oncology medication.
Correct. And that business model still works. Like if I have Keytruda, for example, and let's say, it's normally $1,000, but the counterfeit only costs me, I'm making this for easy math here, only costs me as a counterfeit $100, right? I can, from pure math, risk 9 shipments getting seized and 1 getting through, and I still break even. So the
Yeah.
math for a counterfeiter still holds in that space. But again, if instead of inspecting 1.3 billion parcels, we only have to inspect 300 million, one would hope that the seizure rate overall increases, especially if, and we'll see how that gets implemented, especially if there is a increased demand for advanced data for all of these shipments so they can be targeted better by um, postal inspectors and by the CBP targeting center.
Well, as we walk away from this topic, let's just remember that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And so
Mm-hmm.
while this is not the panacea that's going to end international medicine shipment of counterfeits, I think that this will be an improvement. And for all of my colleagues that work in brand protection who worry about the river of packages that flows through the ports of entry, which includes counterfeit medicines, there's no way that this isn't a positive improvement if it makes the haystack smaller. And for that, I will be grateful and shocked, but grateful.
Yeah, we'll revisit it probably by the end. Like if it really works by the end of the year, we should see a marked decrease in the number of shipments coming in. I also do hope that, in addition, CBP will reform their very, very ill-perceived Type 86 program, which, on a separate note, we had covered, which allows the mass import of these de minimis shipments. Now, with de minimis going away, Type 86 should go away. So it'll be interesting to see if customs just revokes that pilot, because that pilot was intended to allow for the mass import of de minimis. And if de minimis goes away, that kind of would require Type 86 to go away. So we'll see what customs will do on it. They haven't announced anything on it yet. I'll make some phone calls around. I'll report back on the next part to see if, with that de minimis elimination, customs will also pull the plug out of Type 86, which I think for everybody in the shipping industry would be a welcome development.
Excellent. So take us to our next point, which is, I think, possibly the first time it's happened in my adult history working in trademark and brand protection.
Yes. So this certainly is we live in very unprecedented times, and so yes, this is the first time that a office holder, POTUS, the president himself, or his organization, the Trump administration, has taken legal action and filed suit against several unnamed online merchants that were selling counterfeit merchandise related to President Donald Trump and his businesses. So the Trump trademark, the Trump hats, all of the Trump merchandise, including the Trump gold phone that he's selling. And so the organization filed the lawsuit against unnamed online merchants. So it didn't file the lawsuits directly against Amazon, etc., but it filed it against various unnamed online merchants that operate on the marketplaces of Amazon, Walmart, and eBay. And they basically, in their suit, said, that there's a lot of this coming in there. They're not licensed for it, and this should be shut down. The reason why that's a really interesting development, we never had ever the president of the United States or his business basically taking legal action in that space. And for me, this is a shot across the bow, for these online platforms to say, we see what's happening on your platforms and you guys have to do better. And as there's some other legislation, including, the Shop Safe Act and other things that are intended to rein counterfeit sales on online platforms in, it certainly has upped the ante for platforms to say, oh boy, if basically the private organization of the president and shortly thereafter, probably the DOJ is looking at this, we really got to change how we verify sellers on our platforms, how we verify the goods that are being sold on our platforms, and how we enforce trademarks and other protected legal statuses on our platforms so we don't have illegal goods being sold on them, including, I know a later story will be pill presses, right? So I think it will be it's a very good development that there's pressure being added to these online platforms and again, he didn't sue the platforms directly. He sued the merchants on the platforms. But I can guarantee you that the legal teams at Amazon, Walmart, and eBay are definitely looking at this now and saying, okay, this is being ratcheted up. We know that this administration um, has a has a fluid line between Trump's personal businesses and government actions. And I would not be surprised if the DOJ either files an amicus or does a separate action on the same issue. And it puts, for me, these platforms on notice to say the amount of counterfeit that's being sold on platforms in general is unacceptable. So again, a good development, um, but too early to tell where this will go.
I mean, I
What's your
think we
thoughts?
have to look at and see how the platforms react, right? Like the best thing in the world, if you work in a professional area for which regulation and laws are operative, and I can't imagine one that isn't, is to have a member of your profession in the White House, right?
Right.
Pharmacists work very, very hard to support pharmacists running for office because they know at the end of the day, that is good for pharmacy, which is, by the way, good for patients as a whole. It's rare that the interests of pharmacy diverge from the risks of patients. So the interests of patients. So we all benefit as patients do. Now, PBMs don't benefit so well from pharmacists in elected office. But in this case, we've got a trademark holder
Hmm.
in the White House mad about counterfeiters on these platforms, which it just happens to be true that people who make medicine are mad about counterfeiters on these platforms and people that make sneakers
Yeah.
and computers and electronics and everything, clothing. Everybody's got this problem. Wouldn't it be great if the president's actions here would have some spillover effect? Hopefully, Amazon, Walmart, and eBay don't just get rid of all the infringing MAGA counterfeit products and then ignore the rest of us. Hopefully, there's some way to actually make some headway for brand protection teams everywhere because of the attention the White House has brought to this issue.
Yeah, I agree. And the piece behind it will be, and that's why it will be interesting to see where that suit goes is what what remedies will come out of the suit, right? What additional actions um are being taken from it? Because the unnamed sellers, we don't know who the sellers are or the merchants that were being sued in this lawsuit. In all likelihood, those unnamed merchants are overseas, right? And so not necessarily within the reach of U.S. laws. And I would not be surprised if there's not additional talks between the attorneys for the Trump organization as well as probably attorneys from the DOJ starting to talk to the platforms to say, hey, you guys need to have better overall protections to make sure to take these down. And then to your point, one would hope that that becomes a spillover effect because if they put better, for example, know your customer procedures in place to really know who sells on these platforms, to verify who these sellers are, do, for example, a physical verification of the seller, do a physical location verification. You and I many times have seen online sellers that operate out of a rented warehouse space, or you look at it and it's just a private address somewhere. But once you start to really verify, are you really a business? Are you really who you say you are? And should you be selling what you're selling? Like the last example you gave at one of our pods was these people that are shipping counterfeit medicines or fake medicines out of a Hilton or a Marriott somewhere in Toronto. That's a good example of like that probably should not be a verified seller, right? So
Yeah.
yes, the question is, will this create a wholesale change of saying yes, we'll do better know your customer verification, which really I think for me is still the crux in the fact that it's too easy to sell on these platforms. And should there be stronger verification so not everybody can just willy-nilly sell stuff?
Yeah, innovators have for a while now been asking for, in particular, platforms to have better records of who their sellers are,
Yeah.
what bank accounts they use to pay them for, where their true address is. Is it a real address? Is their service a process there? Is that really a corporate address, or did you just put in a PO box, in Hangzhou? And if the Trump administration was not able to identify these sellers, then my hope is that provisions like that, which are part of, the shop safe legislation that people across the industry, across all industries have been supporting, might get a little bit of a boost from the White House now being on the side of people who get ripped off by counterfeiters.
Yeah, no, 100%. So again, a positive development. For this one, definitely too early to tell because it just was filed. But I am hopeful for this, that if there's, we have, I've worked in the space. The last time we tried to put a platform liability on platforms in, '08. We've been working on that since then, and the platforms are strongly fighting that for various reasons, and I get that. But if you have a platform, you should be verifying very strongly who's selling on your platform. For with I guess there's very good know your customer procedures that exist for many other businesses, and the platforms have been fighting those. This lawsuit might be a catalyst that really um, makes progress on this front. And again, this could be a sea change if it results in wholesale change for these platforms.
I agree, and I'm as shocked as anyone to see these progress on these issues that I care so much about. But I guess I just haven't lived long enough to appreciate what it means for there to be a change of power in Washington. The
Yeah.
next issue that I wanted to bring up was that the Partnership for Safe Medicines, which is my day job,
Yes.
just released our 6-month pill press report. And as much as people who know me or who know PSM have noticed, it is not just a series of pictures of orange Home Depot buckets in illicit pill manufacturing sites, although I could look at those all day long.
Yeah.
What we did is since 2019, when we first became fascinated with these machines that make that are illegally owned and make pills, is we have been focused on tracking them, tracking policy around them, and we decided that we are going to do a roundup of what's happening in the issue once every 6 months, and it
Hmm.
included what I would say. And first of all, like I'm going to crow about this because I love the PSM staff and the work that we do, but nobody tracks illegal pill presses as much as we do, and so we've put a lot of that love and work that we do every week, looking to see who's seizing them, who's prosecuting around them, into this report. We pulled all of the federal seizure information, which you can get from a public source for pill presses and pill press parts, including pill molds. We counted all of that up. I had a staffer go through all that material. And so we have a graph of when there were more or less seizures of these things coming through the ports of entry into the US that were then reported in the seizure logs. First of all, that's one data point for all of you that care about pill presses. The second thing is we look in the news every day to see where law enforcement at all levels, local, state, or federal, sees pill presses. And
Hmm.
then we keep a long database of all that open source information about seizures. We use it to build the map about where in the country pill presses have been seized, which is, I think, the only map of its kind. It's the only data feed of its kind. That's also in the report. We are tracking two really major and innovative prosecutions of people, not for being drug dealers, but for illegally selling pill presses to drug dealers. And that has never happened before. That is
Hmm.
actually a really unique prosecution that the DOJ is doing from people who have been making a living at doing this crime for quite a while. And then we're tracking federal and state legislation on pill presses, and finally, we actually mentioned the fact that Google has implemented a new policy in the last 6 months during our reporting period to stop showing pill presses and pill press parts on Google Shopping or in advertising. And I just think, the first part of the work was collecting it. And the second hard part was distilling it down to two sides of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper,
Hmm.
which takes a lot of pain for someone who's as wordy in writing as I am. But we did it because we thought that people will look at it if we make it that short and that visually attractive. So I'm super proud of it. We'll put it in the show notes. And I just think I'm going to be I can't wait to do the next one, which will come around in January.
Agreed. Yeah, with pill presses, so there's several things in there. You know, you and PSM have been tracking this issue for a while now. It was really big for a while, and then it went away. And I think it went away largely because the cartels were just making the pills in Mexico, and as you discussed before, had very, very skilled people that were loading these pills into um, any concealed devices that they could do into cars, including by human trafficking across the country, across the border, or by folks that trafficked it across the border. They had all sorts of manner of conceal it and just were flooding the southern border with it. Um, with the increased enforcement at the southern border, they have started to have a harder time. And with the strong efforts by the DEA, not just this administration, also the previous administration, against all these pills coming across the border, seizures have increased, enforcement has increased, and we'd started to get reports about a year out that the cartels were starting to have a harder time to getting these pills across the border, actually harder to a degree where they started to build warehouses south of the border to hold all the extra pills that they couldn't get across. So our prediction at the time was that we will expect pill presses to increase again, because again, it's easier for me to get a kilo of pure fentanyl into the country than getting in the equivalent in pills into the country, which would be, many, many, many kilos of fentanyl, actually, by the factor of 500,000 higher. So much more volume I have to get across for a pill versus let's go back, cartels, to the business model of let's just get the powder in and then produce it locally in the United States with pill presses, make it here and then distribute it within the United States. And I think our prediction that we kind of had there seems to be holding up, because the increase we have seen in seizures of pill presses, not only at the border, but also in country, is significant. So there's definitely an increase of pill press activity, which is probably an indication that it was harder to get the pills across the border. So they moved back to pills in there. So pill presses continue to be an issue. Now, the one thing that I'm not super positive on is Amazon's commitment, because while we were talking, I Googled heavy duty industrial pill presses on Google, and I can still buy them. Like, they're still there. So um, they're still very much available on their platform. Um, from, I don't know who these companies are, but so yes, again, it actually goes back to the theme we had before. If the administration puts pressure, significant pressure on these platforms to say you have to really stop allowing the sale of these things, um, or have them sold in a way where you verify the buyer. So again, you put a know your customer feature in there. That would be very, very good. Um, but yeah, right now I still see all these pill presses for sale on Amazon from various companies. And again, I don't know if these companies are legit or not, but it is certainly an issue that continues to occur. And it will require, I think, additional pressure on all these sellers to really, really cut off the ability of people to order these presses.
Well, let's actually talk about that for a second. It's going to appear in the next, because it just missed the deadline, the next pill press report. But in late July, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Washington got an 11-year sentence for a man from Auburn, Washington, who had a pill press from a very well-known company that makes them, called LFA. That is a global
Hmm.
company with a major distribution hub in Texas. And he had this pill press. This is not the little hand crank pill press you sometimes see local police seize. This is a big automated machine. He had 11 years in prison, and my hat's off to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Western District of Washington for getting that. But he had his pill press because he told the company that made them that he had a vitamin business. And I think we actually have to have a reasonable conversation as a society about, is that enough? Is that the amount of know your customer information that we need to sell someone a high end pill press? Like, did he really have a vitamin business, or did he say he had a vitamin business? Did he have a vitamin business that was believable, or did he just have a vitamin business with a web page? Like,
Hmm.
how believable was it that this guy actually had a vitamin business that he got this stuff to? That he was able to convince LFA to sell him a pill press. I don't know, but I actually think that this is worth talking about because, as you point out, and as the New York Times piece on fentanyl powder packers pointed out this weekend in the magazine, it is getting harder and harder to get pills in pill form across the border. Smuggling them all, of all
Yeah.
forms is harder for the cartel. We are going to see more pill manufacturing, illicit pill manufacturing in the US. And we have to talk to the companies that make these machines, whether or not they're doing enough to keep them out of the hands of criminals.
Yeah, 100%. And if those companies that make the machines are U.S. companies, yes, you could do a legislative change, which you have in other industries as well. Like you have to be like a licensed, registered participant of um, an industry that would require such machinery. Like you're really a supplement manufacturer, and you would could figure out how to license those. Pharmaceutical companies would clearly be somebody that's in the legitimate space and they're registered with whichever entity you're licensed with, whatever US entity you have. And then any pill press manufacturer is only allowed to sell to a licensed entity. Where that gets tricky if that's a Chinese manufacturer because they're not necessarily bound by US law to not sell to non-licensed actors. So I think there is a opportunity in the US law change to actually, I agree with you, have a reasonable discussion of saying who should be allowed to have pill presses. And you could even further it and say, any pill press that makes, I'll make it up, less than 1,000 pills a day. That's fine, right? And again, I'm picking this number out of thin air. That's fine. That's not a registration. But anything that is a large scale industrial piece, no, there has to be verification for the seller that this is a licensed entity within the United States. And in addition, then you put tremendous pressure on all of the platforms, on all of the search engines, on everybody to say, and you cannot feature, sell, or promote any of these machines on your platform. So it makes it harder for criminals to do this. Now, will it stop for the criminals to do it? Absolutely not. They'll work around it, right? They will find other loopholes, but you want to make it as hard as possible for them and not just have as easy as what I just did here. Type in heavy duty industrial pill press, find it and have, maybe a couple of clicks and get the press. Like you definitely don't want that. So I think there's additional changes needed. You and I for years now spoken about what the changes are. This administration hopefully will have the will to take the large players on and put pressure on them and say, no, you got to do better and make sure that for the larger pill press manufacturers, you can't sell to somebody that shouldn't be having a machine and put more pressure on platforms and search engines to say, and you cannot advertise or offer these machines for sale. So with their strong focus on fentanyl and everything that's happening with the ongoing opioid crisis, I feel hopeful that something will happen there. Your report certainly a very good one. I know that folks on your team are working together to Congress, and more good discussions will come out of it. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, and two things before we walk away from this topic. I just want to again congratulate and recognize the hard work of AUSA Max Shiner in the Western District of Washington, DOJ U.S. Attorney's Office, and the whole office, because these things are, as you can imagine, a prosecution that goes to trial is not the kind of thing um, that is done by any one human being. And I just think that we actually can have a reasonable conversation about this, because the picture of this pill press I'm looking at that was made by LFA, it's not a small end pill press, and it is totally reasonable, as it is done in the financial industry, to have varying know your customer requirements depending on the level of threat. And I think an industrial strength pill making machine is an industrial strength threat to public safety, and maybe we
Agreed.
should have a conversation about whether or not that enough due diligence was done before selling that to that individual.
Agreed. Very much agreed. Yeah, no, good. Do you want to do some quick shout outs and quick hits that we don't have time to fully dive into?
I think so, and I'm going to let you go first because I love it when you say Labubu.
That's the German twist. So this is a little silly story, but I like it. There was a report that there's an increased um, uh, discovery of counterfeit Labubu dolls. I had no idea what they were until my kids made me aware of what they are. And they've become such a hype. And as we always say, counterfeiters will follow the hype, whatever trends, whatever is big, whatever is popular, they will counterfeit. And sure enough, the Better Business Bureau is warning folks that there is an increase of fake Labubu toys across the United States. So, again, as folks buy fake Labubu toys, which are apparently also really hard to find, again, I'm not in that space, but if you find someone that is all of a sudden that is a collector's item that is hard to get, and all of a sudden you can easily get it and it's cheaper than it should be, it's probably a counterfeit. So I just found that very funny.
I want to call out as a big thank you the CBP staff in the port of entry in Cincinnati. They just did a week-long intensive hunt of all the packages coming through looking for counterfeit injectables.
Nice.
And they found $3.5 million worth. But this is the worst part. And I want you to grip the arms of the chair you're sitting in. They found counterfeit weight loss injectables coming into the US destined for destinations in 40 different states,
Jeez.
right? So basically, almost every state in this country is the recipient of a counterfeit weight loss injectable. Every single one of those could be a patient fatality or a serious medical adverse event. And CBP Cincinnati chose to take precious resources and do a week-long intensive to try and intercept these and identify the senders, possibly putting import alerts on them. And I think that that's just really laudable. And I just wanted to take a moment to make sure that if you're listening to this and you support that port, or you support CBP, that you appreciate the amount of work that it probably took to spend an entire week focusing on this problem.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. The Port of Cincinnati has been doing great work on the IPR space for years. And yeah, I love that they're doing this. On a similar vein, and yeah, this is actually a very positive podcast, lots of progress. Congress has finally fully scheduled all fentanyl and all fentanyl analogs, which is amazing. Quick background for folks. The cartels basically had, because fentanyl was already scheduled, had started to engineer around it and basically attached a molecule here or twisted a molecule there, and therefore creating a fentanyl analog. And therefore, it wasn't really fentanyl that was scheduled, but fentanyl looking like, but therefore not scheduled, harder to prosecute. Prosecutors had to prove that the product was then lethal, and it made prosecution harder. So the DEA had temporary scheduled fentanyl analogs, but DEA can only temporarily schedule those for 2 years at a time, and so kept extending the permanent scheduling of fentanyl. And many folks, including you guys, have worked on with Congress to permanently schedule all fentanyl and say anything that looks basically anything that looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, is a duck. Same for fentanyl. If it looks or acts like fentanyl, it's fentanyl, and it is a huge success for over 6 years. I know you and your partners, including us, have been lobbying on this issue and are beyond pleased that this was finally passed, was signed into law, and again, not that it will immediately stop all fentanyl overdoses and will immediately stop all of this, but it's as you keep adding these small incremental wins and changes up, it makes it harder for criminals, it makes it easier to prosecute them, and it makes it easier for prosecutors to, ask for a 25-year sentence on these, and that all of that adds up to deterrence, hopefully on fentanyl. So I know the families you're working with were all very satisfied that this finally got scheduled. Huge work by everybody, and I'm beyond thrilled that it was finally pushed across the finish line.
My big thanks to you and your staffers, including Stacy, who worked on this 6 years. That's the
Hmm.
part of the Schoolhouse Rock video of how a bill becomes a law that nobody talks about, is that it takes 6 frickin' years sometimes to get this stuff done. So I say that to people who are not familiar with the lobbying world. Like, okay, if you want me to undertake this, you understand you're asking me to undertake possibly a 5 to 10 year commitment to make this thing happen. And then they always hesitate and say, well, is there some easier way that we can get this problem solved? And I'm like, yes, let us look for an easier way, because that is a
Yeah,
long time. I
and it
graduated a
comes to
child and sent them to
yeah,
college in that time.
yeah, no, and it comes to, a lot of it is just political will, and there was political will with both houses being Republican controlled, with the administration having huge focus on it. Law enforcement has heavily testified on it, and everything just lined up. And finally, there was the political will there to overcome objections from various parties over this. There are good safeguards in there, so there won't be over policing on it. And so, no, but I agree with you. Yes, 6 years in Congress time is almost lightning speed. So it's wonderful to see this happen. We don't always have a lot of these successes because they take so long. So it's very, very gratifying to have seen this one go across the finish line. Much agreed. What do you got?
On my side, we have another lawsuit where a rights holder is suing, counterfeiters or people accused of counterfeiting. Fashion retailer Brandy Melville has their holding company has sued Timu, and there are a number of things that they accuse them of doing, which I suppose will be adjudicated in civil court. But it's not just like the Lululemon lawsuit against Costco, where they're accusing them of just making a copy. They're actually accusing them of doing that, but also of stealing the photos from the Brandy Melville website and using them in listings
Oh,
on Timu,
makes
and
sense.
selling on Timu Brandy Melville logoed items, which is probably as close to trademark infringement as the definition was intended. This is their second lawsuit in this space. They sued Sheen or Shine, depending on how you
Hmm.
pronounce it, not too long ago. And I think that there is some common elements to both of them. Brandy Melville eye print boxer shorts are one of the items that is cited. But this is going to be interesting. This is not the first time that retailers have done this, but these cases are becoming more common, and they're definitely getting more attention now.
No, and I think it's fabulous. For me, if Sheen, and I think it's Sheen, but if Sheen has a business model of we want to sell cheap fashion that was produced in Malaysia or wherever it was produced, or China, India, wherever, and therefore the fashion is cheaper because your labor is way cheaper, and so the item instead of US produced will cost $100 versus $500. If that's your business model, that's fine. Sell it cheaper, and then even if you have a tariff on it, you probably will still be cheaper. That's your business model. That's fine. If But what these platforms have done, I think, is a couple of things. One of them is not only were they selling it cheaper, but then they were using cracks and loopholes in the system, such as the minimis, to completely exploit existing systems. Plus, they put, sometimes a blind eye to something that is a clear IP violation. And so, yeah, as more and more brands, and again, hopefully administration, DOJ, more and more law enforcement really put the screws onto that, hopefully they can step away from the really illicit part of their business and just say, fine, we're just going to be, H&M, but just as an online model, we're just going to sell cheap stuff, and cheap stuff is fine. Counterfeiting stuff is not fine. So yes, I'm excited that these lawsuits exist. I'm excited that these pressures continue to increase. And yeah, if those companies can move that to a more legitimate business, that would be fantastic.
What do you
All
got?
right. I got one more, and it's just the thing, the gift that keeps on giving. Fake hundreds. Watch out for everybody. If you are if you are at a backyard sale and somebody wants to buy your grandmother's blanket with $100 bill, uh, don't take it. I would just say at this point, because there are some incredibly realistically looking $100 bills going around. There are various theories of why they are so good looking. Some theories are that people take $20 or lower denomination bills, wash them and reprint them, and therefore keep the security features in there. So that can exist. It is just some of them are very well printed copies that even say copy on them, but very tiny in the corner, so you might not see it. But in general, the amount of news stories about fake 100s that I've seen going around um, is just very large. I don't think we're in the space yet where the $100 super note is back, which was literally indistinguishable from the actual $100 bill. And so it is concerning to see this. So if somebody wants to buy something from you and gives you a bunch of hundreds, say, no, could you give me 20s?
Or can you just Venmo me the money? Because we know
Just Venmo
from
me. That's exactly it.
we, we know from consumer fraud reports that it's very, very difficult to get money back if you Venmo or Zelle money to a scammer.
That's right.
On my side, I want to finish up with one topic that caught my eye and talk about a word, which is a word that I've learned in the last 10 years. The Amazon Counterfeit Crimes Unit, CCU, because if you're going to create
Hmm.
a new unit, you better have a great acronym for it,
You got to acronym
is
it, yeah.
marking for themselves a record uh, in recent years of $180 million in penalties and 65 criminal convictions accomplished. I was not. I did not know that Amazon had a counterfeit crimes unit that actually took cases to law enforcement. And I actually haven't worked with a brand protection team that's worked with them. So I don't actually know, and this is the new word, how good they do deconfliction, right? Did these
Yeah.
cases that they worked on, did they just help with a case that a brand holder did? Or did they actually run a case on their own and possibly seize evidence that they should have given to a trademark holder for their own case? Were they additive or were they competitive? And I think that that's really, really big. I'm glad that they're building cases that get convictions because that's law enforcement. And of course, we all need to give law enforcement all the help we can in this space. But I do wonder about whether or not the brand holders consider them to be additive or competitive to their work.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be the negative Nelly here. Um, Talking to my friends in brand protection, they say this is more window dressing than anything else. And just to break it down, that report, the number that they claim is over 5 years. So that's 65 prosecutions in 5 years, which is roughly 15 a year or so. And that's not a lot. And that's not a lot for what is Amazon now, a $3 trillion company or whatever. So I'm glad they're taking steps. I wonder how much of it is window dressing. From what I heard from the brand protection folks that I work with, is that the CCU is like a handful of folks, so it's not that many, and that they mostly do cases that are very easy, and most cases are not brand initiated. And so they don't really have a really good unit, according to my contacts, where you say, I have the seller and now help me with the seller and work it up and do all of these investigations. Now, if a brand protection team has a really strong case, CCU is an addition to it and will gladly provide the data and shut down sellers and do all of those things. But from what I have heard, um, they're not that great to work with because they're just not that resource. And again, I just want to put it in perspective. Yes, I know 180 million sounds like a lot. 65 cases sounds like a lot, but over a 5-year span, and when you look at the size of Amazon, it's probably a drop in the bucket. And Amazon has been, putting out its counterfeit report, and uh, some of this from Amazon might be a bit more window dressing and PR than actual real enforcement. So I'm skeptical of what they're reporting here. So we'll see. But I think as more and more pressure gets applied to them, Amazon certainly has the resources to drive counterfeit down significantly more. Like if Amazon would employ, I don't know, I'll make it up again, 1,000 people in the CCU, which they could because they employ hundreds of thousands of people, then yeah, you would like, wow, that's a really impressive unit. But from reports I heard, it's a handful. So I think they can do better. And I think part of it is just window dressing right now. But, um, I might be the glass half empty guy on that one.
Well, that's fine. And I'll say two things before I finish up on this topic. One of which is that we have not seen a lot of support from Amazon and the other platforms for more commitments to be more transparent and to do better know your customer to sellers on their platforms. And I speak specifically about our work in Congress to pass legislation like ShopSafe, which would allow them a safe harbor liability from helping to transact counterfeits if they would just make it easier, or I should say more thoroughly vet their sellers on their platform. But they have been resisting that for quite a while now. It's been a frustration on our side from people on the brand protection side. And they don't have to employ 1,000 people. They could just implement better know your customer. It would certainly benefit people like me who buy on their platform to know that they've actually figured out who is possibly at fault when that cell phone charger sets my house on fire.
let's hope that's just a hypothetical example, but yes, 100% agreed. So we'll see. I think I think they feel under pressure, and the first response is let's do some PR and say we're doing good work, and that hopefully will be followed by doing actual good work. So we'll see.
If you out there are listening and you're in brand protection and you've had an unsatisfying experience with the Amazon counterfeit crimes, or Amazon as the host for a platform of a seller who was selling infringing products, please get in touch with us. We would like to tell your story, almost certainly anonymously. I'm not even going to expect that someone's going to tell me their story on the record, but we would love to talk about your story on the podcast. So send us a note at our website through Contact Imitation Nation, and you can get to Sven and I. And I'll just say as a parting thought, this is the longest episode we've done in a while, but please make sure you like and subscribe. There's no way that the de minimis episode was going to be de minimis. We're pretty much doomed to actually have run long. And
yeah, no, this certainly was longer, but a lot of really good progress, a lot of things that needed to be discussed. So with that, Shabir, read us out.
The Imitation Nation podcast is a production of Cause Stories and is the sole owner. Podcast production by Anna Rowland, management by Sarah Ember Safdar, and theme music written by Jonathan Boyle.